secret airstrikes, shifting alliances, and a conflict that may be escalating behind the scenes. Reports now suggest Saudi Arabia and even the United Arab Emirates have carried out covert attacks inside Iran. So is the Middle East entering a more dangerous phase? And who's really driving the escalation? According to the Reuters news agency, Saudi Arabia has carried out numerous attacks on Iran in retaliation for Tehran's missile strikes in the kingdom during the Mideast war. That's the first time Saudi Arabia is known to have directly carried out military action on Iranian soil. Reuters says both Western and Iranian officials have confirmed the attacks, but the agency says it was not initially clear what specifically the Saudi forces were targeting. Earlier, the Wall Street Journal reported that the United Arab Emirates launched strikes on an oil refinery located on Iran's Lavan Island in early April. Both reports revealed previously unknown participation in the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. I'm joined now by someone who knows a thing or two about Iran and the Gulf region. Giorgio Cafiero is the CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics, a geopolitical risk think tank based in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Giorgio.
Good to be with you.
So what do these reports tell us? How significant is it that Saudi Arabia is now reportedly carrying out direct strikes inside Iran?
Yeah, right after the United States and Israel launched this war on Iran in late February, part of the Iranian strategy for responding was to attack all 6 of the GCC states. This put the Gulf Arab monarchies in a very difficult position. They, of course, did not want the United States and Israel to wage this war. One of the main reasons why is they understood that there would be chaotic consequences. The turmoil would inevitably spill into the GCC. This would pose a huge threat to the Gulf states' national security, their economic health. And so the GCC states had to make very difficult decisions about how to deal with the reality of Iran's aggression. On one hand, they wanted to see stability prevail and wanted to avoid measures that could escalate the situation, escalate the crisis. At the same time, they wanted to deter Iran from carrying out future acts of aggression. And it's not the case that all 6 GCC states went about this the same way, but clearly when making these decisions, the UAE and Saudi Arabia felt that it was necessary to send Iran a message that attacking their countries would meet direct responses on the part of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. But we should also note that Saudi Arabia has also put a lot of effort into diplomacy throughout this crisis, working very hard to try to de-escalate the conflict as quickly as possible. Therefore, these Saudi strikes on Iran is just one part of the bigger picture.
Now, if we're looking at that bigger picture, the United Arab Emirates has also reportedly struck a refinery inside Iran. And if that is confirmed, how dangerous is this kind of escalation between these regional powers?
Well, it definitely tells us that the UAE is acting in a very independent manner. It is not going to wait around for a permission slip from some other country to act in defense of what the UAE sees as its own national interests. And let's keep in mind that out of all 6 GCC states, Iran targeted the UAE with the greatest number of attacks. Hands down, the UAE was the biggest target of Iran's in the Gulf. So it's very clear that the UAE is determined to demonstrate that it's a very muscular country and it is very quick to wage unilateral military strikes when it deems that necessary. This is a big contrast from the image of the UAE maybe 20 years ago when it was seen as more of a passive country. But this is consistent at the same time with military action that the UAE has taken in Yemen and Libya. To be frank, it was not necessarily a huge surprise, at least for me, when I learned that the UAE took this action. The Emirati leadership was very clear that this was an option that they would consider taking once Iran started hitting the UAE with missiles and drones in late February. But nonetheless, this, to get to your point, this really speaks to the fact that there were many different actors in this conflict, many different complex variables in the equation. And obviously, with more countries involved militarily, it makes the entire situation more dangerous. No doubt about that.
And moving forward, do you think this could mark a shift to more direct confrontation with Iran in the region?
When it comes to Iran and the UAE, I think so, but not necessarily so when it comes to Iran and Saudi Arabia. I actually think that Iran and Saudi Arabia are probably going to both work on trying to mitigate tensions and limit hostilities between the two. There are a number of reasons why both sides have vested interests in doing exactly that. Saudi Arabia is really sort of part of a quad right now that also includes Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan. Those are all countries that Iran wants to have better relations with, and therefore Tehran being aggressive towards Saudi Arabia could undermine those relationships. Saudi Arabia is also aware that it could suffer very much when it comes to potential scenarios in which Iran wages more attacks against Saudi Arabia, especially when we consider the issue of desalination plants in the kingdom. So I think Saudi Arabia is going to really focus more on diplomacy and de-escalation. The UAE, on the other hand, I think is much more aligned with hawkish policies that Israel advocates for. And I think we're going to see the UAE turning more so toward Israel as an ally. And naturally, this is going to heighten Iran's perception of Abu Dhabi as a threatening actor in the region. And I certainly expect future acts of Iranian aggression toward GCC states to really be focused on the UAE more than any other country.
All right, now, if we could for a second, let's cast our gaze to the United States. And there are reports that Washington has quietly welcomed these strikes. What does that say about the United States strategy in the region right now?
Well, these Saudi and Emirati strikes were taking place during the conflict prior to the Pakistani-mediated ceasefire that went into effect April 7th, April 8th. So I think what these strikes, which the Saudis and the Emiratis carried out, tells us is that there was some alignment between the Trump administration and some in the GCC when it came to questions about how to deal with Iran once the war had started. But again, we should note, though, that all of the GCC states, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, were against the decision to wage Operation Epic Fury back in late February. And so there are very strong disagreements that all of the GCC states have with the Trump administration, despite the fact that Saudi Arabia and the UAE did wage these attacks on Iran, sort of in alignment with the Trump administration's goals at the time.
Now, even if there was some disagreement, could the U.S. backing, even if it's informal, embolden Gulf states to take more aggressive action? And if so, what would those risks? What would the risks of that be?
Well, I think the Gulf Arab leaders are very realistic about what it means to work with the Trump administration. Trump as a leader is very unpredictable, rather unhinged. He's really all over the map. Just as everyone in Europe knows, also policymakers in the Gulf know that it's very risky to become too dependent or reliant on Trump. They are trying to shift their foreign policies in ways so that they're more autonomous from the United States. They're not seeking to end their very close alliances and partnerships with the U.S. But again, this is about becoming more autonomous from the U.S. And I think they clearly have a concern about any scenario whereby they would align closely with the U.S. in a campaign against Iran, only for Trump to randomly declare a victory, end the U.S. role in such military operations, and then leave the Gulf Arab states on their own to deal with the chaotic aftermath. So in sum, to really answer your question, I think they're going to definitely be very careful before doing anything that makes them vulnerable to the unpredictable nature of Trump.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. That was Giorgio Cafiero, CEO of Gulf State Analytics. Thanks for helping us break it down.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So why do you think the Gulf states could have attacked Iran? Leave your comments below. And if you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Aaron Tilton. Thanks for watching.